imagine maybe traders away from each other run down the hall themselves, screaming, throwing piles of dollar bills in the air and giggling maniacally. It was one of those crazy days. By late this afternoon, by 2 o'clock Eastern, the Dow brushed up against an all-time record high. It hit almost its highest point ever in the whole history of the Dow. It came within 15 points of the record. Now, the record was set in October 2007, notably before the financial crisis, before the American economy imploded and almost took the world down with it. The Dow today came within spitting distance of pre-financial crisis record highs, the highest of all time. Amazing. And of course, the stock market on any given day is not an indicator of the general health of the economy as a whole. But that race to the top at the stock market today comes alongside a bunch of other good and surprising economic news. Today we learned, for example, that the number of Americans seeking unemployment benefits fell by 22,000. So fewer people on unemployment, that's a good thing. It is a good sign. It means the job market may be picking up. Also today, news that American businesses are placing more orders and revving up production because they think the economy is getting stronger. Another good sign. Also, the dollar gained strength today. Yay, Uncle Buck. And it turns out the economy did not shrink at the end of last year by 0.1%. That is what we heard before. When they revised the numbers, it turns out actually it wasn't negative. The economy did not shrink. The economy grew in the last quarter of last year. It grew by the smallest, teensiest bit possible, but still, growing is better than shrinking, which is what we thought it was before. All of these positive signs about the economy here at home, plus turns out there's nice things to say today about the whole world and about how we fit into the whole world. Quote, sentiment was shored up by hopes over the global economic recovery following a run of upbeat economic data, particularly out of the U.S. Woo! A global economic recovery led by the U.S. Woo! Maybe there's some way we could try to screw that up on purpose. Because of all that economic news today, all of that good economic financial news today, that all coincides with this as our political news today. Our political news today is that we are giving up. Tomorrow's the deadline that everybody's been talking about for months now, right? The crisis that we must avert, that Congress must take action to avoid. And if they don't, crash, horrible consequences. Congress, save us. Tomorrow is the deadline. We are officially in the 11th hour. This is the last minute. This is the moment when everything is supposed to be getting fixed, when Congress is supposed to be up all night sweating it out. Actually, today, Congress went home. 2:07 p.m. and 13 seconds, the House stands adjourned until Monday. 6:30 p.m. and 20 seconds, the Senate stands adjourned until Monday. They're gone. The whole point was to make them fight with each other and fix this thing down to the wire. They left in the afternoon. To be clear, they did not go home because they fixed it, or because they decided that we wouldn't do this thing, or because they decided, actually, this thing is no big deal. It is still the same looming thing that they all say we shouldn't do. $85 billion, boom, austerity, all at once. The Pentagon is supposed to absorb half of those cuts. The Pentagon is big, but that's a big cut to happen all at once. Federal workers are facing furloughs, forced days off. That would mean a 20% decrease in their take-home pay. There will be cuts to funding for everything from airports to preschools to WIC, the nutrition program for low-income women, infants, and children. Lots of other government programs, too. Pretty much everybody agrees that what is set to go into effect at midnight tomorrow is lousy policy. Even if you want to cut that much all at once out of the economy by cutting it out of the government, you wouldn't cut like this. That was the whole idea. It was bad policy on purpose. This was supposed to be a bad policy that would hurt the country, and particularly hurt the economy. It was designed to suck on purpose so nobody would want to do it, so nobody would want to see it go into effect, so everybody, in fact, would work like crazy to stop it from going into effect. This is a self-imposed, horrible idea that is horrible on purpose, and pretty much everybody agrees with that. Except, apparently, the financial markets, which, at least judging by today, don't give a hoot about the sequester. Quoting from the AP today, investors appear sanguine over the risks associated with planned spending cuts that are due to take effect at the start of March. The start of March would be tomorrow. The planned sequester could hit U.S. growth if no deal is reached to avoid it. Previous experience, however, suggests a last-minute deal will be cobbled together. Well, previous experience does kind of suggest a last-minute deal will be cobbled together. Remember, it was just a few months after the Republicans took the House in 2011 that we were within an hour of a government shutdown. That was our first narrowly averted self-imposed disaster. 3 months later, July 2011, there was the big fight over whether or not we were going to raise the debt ceiling, which we always do. That one was also narrowly averted by just a couple of days, even though getting that close to it caused us harm. Just a couple of months after that, government shutdown averted again, narrowly, of course, within a couple of days. And then fast forward this most repetitive movie ever to the end of last year, December 2012. We were about to go off the fiscal cliff until, we got an 11th hour deal. Actually, with the fiscal cliff, we got kind of a 13th hour deal because technically they did go over the cliff. And then after they fell, they kind of reached back up and found a low-hanging branch that was hanging off the end of the cliff. And they grabbed the branch and they were able to pull themselves back up over the cliff. They really do keep creating these cliffs and brinks and crises and then veering to safety right at the last minute or right after the last minute in the case of the cliff. So understandably, we do not panic as much anymore now when they tell us it is a new crisis. Everybody just counts on them fixing it at the last minute somehow. Can we count on them doing that again? The Senate today voted on both a Republican plan to not do this thing. That failed 38-62. Then the Senate voted on a Democratic plan to not do this thing. And that one actually got a majority. It got 51 votes, but the Republicans filibustered it, so that failed as well. In the House today, John Boehner reiterated his often stated claim that his side, the House, has passed something to not do this dumb thing. When pressed by the press today, though, he did have to admit that his Congress has not actually done something in this Congress. They passed something last year in the old Congress. Anything passed in the old Congress doesn't count for this one. It's a new Congress. And in this Congress, John Boehner and his band of merry men, they have still done nothing. Still, though, they took the occasion to go home. Everybody is heading home. And even though everybody is heading home, President Obama has invited the top congressional leadership to not go home and instead go to the White House tomorrow to talk about these cuts. So Nancy Pelosi, John Boehner, Mitch McConnell, and Harry Reid will meet with the president and vice president at the White House to talk about this current self-imposed disaster tomorrow. But the rest of Congress is done, adjourned, on their way home. Presumably tomorrow's meeting will be to try to come up with a last-minute way to avert it. But honestly, with both sides of Congress adjourned and the deadline upon us, it kind of seems like this goose is cooked. Everybody is still assuming it's going to be fixed somehow. The markets seem to be assuming that. But why are they assuming that? Do they know something that we don't know? Joining us now is Congressman Xavier Becerra. He's a Democrat of California and chairman of the House Democratic Caucus. Congressman Becerra, thank you so much for being with us.
Rachel, great to be with you.
So do the markets know something that we don't know? Is there any chance of this being averted now, or is this done?
I think they've been cooking in all of these shenanigans that we've seen in Congress, principally driven in the House by the Republican majority, for quite some time. And so they've become accustomed to this the way I think the American public has become accustomed to this. And unfortunately, I think this has become the new normal for Republicans to try to govern. And it's not business as usual for the average family in America, but I think Republicans have decided that in order to fulfill their agenda to make government smaller, they're going to do it this way, even though it may cost the American economy 750,000 American jobs.
Well, let's try to figure out the weight between those two different things. If you're saying that for the average American family, this is not going to be business as usual, we're looking at 750,000 jobs that are going to be cost by doing this. But in terms of the sort of the media reaction to it, the general public's reaction to it so far, and certainly the market's reaction to it today, it's cooked in. People have expected that nothing was going to happen. And so this apparently is something that we all are going to try to roll with. Do you think that latter set of circumstances is inappropriate? Should people be more freaked out than they are?
Well, if you're the average American, you should be getting freaked out simply because this new normal is not good. It is not good for the economy to have a ratcheting up of job creation. We've had over 6 million jobs created in the last 3 years, which is great, 166,000 new private sector jobs last month. But now you've got Congress by its inaction, and you're right, the House Republican leadership told us to all go home today after 2 o'clock. We're going to now cost the economy 750,000 jobs by not dealing with this so-called across-the-board cut, the sequester. And so while the economy wants to launch, here you've got this manufactured crisis where Republicans decided not to try to come up with a bill to deal with the sequester, and so we may lose 750,000 jobs. That's not the way to do business. That's not the way to govern the largest economy in the world.
As we blow through tomorrow with no House in session and no Senate in session, is the harm that you're saying is going to be done by hitting this deadline, by hitting the sequester, is it reparable? Can something be done when Congress comes back on Monday to undo the fact that we've blown through the deadline? Can it retroactively be fixed?
You know, you could deal with some of this, but the reality is that you're now placing in the minds of our business leaders, in the minds of the average American family, this sense that you can't trust that the congressional leadership, the politicians, will do this the right way. Even after the president put a balanced plan on the table to deal with these sequester cuts, even as you just showed in your earlier clip, that the Senate passed a bill by 52 votes, but because of the shenanigans through the filibuster, Senate Republicans were able to defeat a majority passed bill. That's the kind of thing that makes you feel like, well, I shouldn't have confidence that even though the economy is giving me signs that the markets are going to grow, job opportunities are going to grow, I can never trust that the politicians are going to make it, let us continue that growth. And that's the difficulty, is we're almost setting into the mindset, cementing into the mind of the American public that Congress can't do its job.
You have a leadership role among congressional Democrats. When you see Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid go into that meeting tomorrow with Mitch McConnell and John Boehner, the president and the vice president, when they have that very top tier level meeting tomorrow, are you expecting that to just be talks about this in a general way? Or is that actually going to be a working meeting where some sort of plan for retroactively fixing this thing might be announced at the end of that meeting?
I think, Rachel, that the president is going to try to have a huddle with the congressional leaders and find out, can we get somewhere? You didn't like my balanced approach. What can you come up with on the Republican side? The Republican bill in the Senate didn't even get all Republicans to vote for it. And in the House, as I mentioned, the House Republicans didn't even offer a bill for the last 56 days since the beginning of this calendar year. And so I think the president probably is going to ask, where can we go? Is there any room for negotiation? Or are we just going to go through this brinksmanship all over again? By the way, that's why I voted against this so-called fiscal cliff deal back at the very beginning of the year in January 1st, because I knew that what that deal would do was spawn 3 more fiscal cliffs, the one we're experiencing now. In the next few weeks, we're going to have perhaps a government shutdown if the Republicans try to use that to try to extract more harmful cuts to very important programs. And then again, we're going to deal with, guess what, the debt ceiling limit.
Yeah. You know, you probably shouldn't be able to call it a crisis when you can plan them out in advance on your own calendar months ahead of time. But that's what we do now. Congressman Xavier Becerra, Democrat of California, thank you for your time tonight, sir. Appreciate having you here. Thank you. All right. Well, in a day of bewildering politics news, there was also some really widely misunderstood news about a helicopter today. Plus, the intersection of convicted felons and Congress gets more intersecty. That's coming up.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. We do not give up. Expect surprises. Subscribe.